Okay, welcome back everybody. We're finally getting to the good stuff here. Little painting. So I apologize. I forgot to push record, and all I've done so far, and we haven't even finished it yet, is I'm applying. So it's been, you guys watch the carve and prep. We've got a nice stained piece. I usually let them sit at least 2 days before I'll start painting them. If you don't, you get all kinds of weird spots and things. Just let them dry for whatever stain you're using, whether it's oil or based or water based. But essentially, what I've done is right now I'm applying. We're gonna start this with I always start with the base colors. So basically the majority of, so if you got a piece that's got, whether it's a landscape or it's got a lot of sky in it, or big, like this one has a great big turtle and it has a big water background. So you can see the picture in the background. It's laying in front of there. You can see the picture of the turtle that we're going to be paint. It's the exact same image that we created in ChatGTP. I just print it off and I bring it out there so I can use it for reference. And basically, in this one, we're going to say, okay, we're going to do a tan turtle. And you always start with the lighter colors first on these big base colors. At least I do. Because when you go to lay the next base color down, it covers these edges a lot better. If you start the other way, it's really tough to cover that whole edge with the tan. You end up spending about 18 coats. But right here, I'm doing just the first base, and it doesn't take, it sucks in a lot of paint. And this is actually a sand yellow. And all the paints that you're going to see me use, other than some of the smaller little bottles, are all manufactured by Shuttle Art, and they're just acrylics. Some are metallic, some are regular. Nothing special. I think I started with one of their $30 16 color kits, and then I bought a metallic kit, and then you figure out that you only use certain colors more than others, so you end up buying the bigger bottles of those. And I normally use, really, I basically just use angled brushes, 3 or 4 different sizes, and the smaller 3-0 and 10-0 really small fine detail brushes. So I'm applying the first coat, and it's really important, and I'll probably say this a few times through the video, but when you apply this, you don't, it's all these ridges, right? So you get all these ridges on a 3D carve, which is different than a canvas paint. You've got to, it's really important to make sure that all of the, let's call it little chunks of paint that catch on the ridges, make sure those are all cleaned up. So you don't want any standing paint. So you'll see me go back and I spend a lot of time just feathering over it. And like right now, we're not worried about the edges at all, so we're not really doing a real clean edge on this. I could, there's a big angled brush that I used a lot, obviously. Just water, everything's water based. These are supposedly non-toxic, so I don't really worry about anything. And I usually have a bucket on the floor behind us that has water in it, and I've been using these little, I think I got a whole kit of paintbrushes back in the day, and it came with 5 or 6 of these pallets, these little white pallets, and I've been using them for months. So there's a picture we're going to do, and what I'm pointing to there, and I can't remember exactly what my thought process was, but at some point you have to pick how you're going to paint this thing. So, and you can, obviously you can pick whatever colors you like. I don't always, rarely do I, follow exactly. But so that, what I just showed you is a metallic shuttle art paint called Pale Gold. And Pale Gold is, you could mix that yourself also. I think it's, if you can go look it up on the internet and it'll tell you it's probably yellow and some other colors mixed together. But this Pale Gold ends up to be a really nice tan color. And the video color is maybe a hair off. It's pretty close though. So here we're applying the second coat, and usually I let those coats dry probably 15-20 minutes at least in between coats, and you'll know right away if it's still wet when you start putting it back on. But you can see how the metallics colors are really making that stand out. And we'll go over this, and obviously I sped this up a bit. We'll go over this a couple times. I'll do one coat and you'll see all that back and forth movement, and a lot of that is to prevent the little clumpings we get because they're a real pain later. And I found that it's important to, especially on these, before you get a layer of paint on there, to not dab it on. So if you make like 18 little dots, if you don't get those dots spread out very quickly, they tend to go to the next layer. They'll pull the next layer up when you go to spread it. You'll end up with all these little spots. It'll be hard to cover again. Metallics are really satisfying to put on. I enjoy doing metallics paintings, and they really, really, really pop when you lacquer it. And if you notice at this point, I'm not really worried at all about the edges. We'll cover that all with some shade of blue. And I really don't have a terribly, this whole series, you guys will see that, it's not terribly complicated. And part of the reason is because this is a whole lot easier than painting on canvas. We're basically pretend the lines, pretend it's paint by number, and the lines are your carves. So you've got all these raised areas, and you can, you'll never probably get an image as exactly like the carve. So you have to use a little bit of, you know, little bit of creativity and what you want, what colors you want, what where the edges. If they've got an edge, you say, okay, this is exactly where I want the edge. But the color, I use the pictures. There's a whole stack of pictures underneath there, and I use the pictures for everything because to me, pictures are really important for shading. So unless you're, you know, an artist and somebody that does this a lot, the shading doesn't come natural to me. I mean, I get it once I paint it, and kind of the more you do it, you kind of understand that what makes more sense. But when I first started, it didn't make sense to me. And so, but if I followed the pictures, I was okay. So this is the second coat. Let that dry 10 or 15 minutes at least between coats. And it usually takes, the second coat will be enough for this. And then the metallic turtle will be done. And as you can tell, I obviously don't work that fast. But this whole process from start to finish is probably 3.5 hours, depending upon how much detail I do and things like that. So here we're going to start the background, and I am zipping through this really quick. And I'm going to choose, I think, and I could be wrong, but I'm going to choose one of my blues. So all those are shuttle art metallics. There's aquamarine blues. There's different blues that look purple. There's all kinds of shades. And if you look at the blue on the picture, it's kind of to me, it had a little bit of a gray in it, and it's a little bit darker. So I started with some blue, and I put a little gray on it, all metallics. And you can mix your acrylics and metallics, and it looks just fine. But for this painting, I'm going to use everything's going to be acrylics except for that first coat, because on the turtle, that first coat of acrylic that's not metallic, for some reason, and somebody can probably explain this, but it really lets the metallic stick better. If you do the first coat just metallics, the second coat of metallic just doesn't stick as well for some reason. So here we ended up with a gray, and this is our first coat. We'll do two coats of this as well. So the first color and all this stuff, even the turtle. So if I'd have blended the turtle, and I would have said, okay, I'm not really sure if I like this color, but I'm going to do the first coat. Just make sure that the first coat, that your second coat's going to be just a little bit darker. Don't go too dark on your first coat because it's a lot harder to cover it up. So that's kind of what I'm doing here. I like that gray blue. It's a little bit hard to tell because it's bleeding through so bad at the wood, but I like it. I mean, I like blue's my favorite color, so I like all blues, but I like it. It's kind of close to the picture, a little bit lighter, obviously, and a little bit grayer. And, you know, but here we sped that up quite a bit. And once again, I don't get worried too much about the edges until this point. Now I take a really small, like a 1/4 inch angled brush, and I apologize, you can't see all these angles. I'll try to do a little bit better job next time if we do another one. But I'm going around, I'm cutting it in, and I'm getting everything as close to the edge of that turtle where I think the edge needs to be. Now they don't have to be perfect, everybody, because we're going to go around and we're going to shade all this. So the lines don't have to be perfect. Don't worry about having a razor sharp straight line and it's just perfect and little bump, because you'll go back and you'll shade this in a lot darker than you think you will. So that's exactly what I'm doing. Just going around and cutting it in the best I can. And I'm right-handed, so I probably should have put the camera on the right side, but here we are. Hindsight's 2020. And I might go back after I make this audio recording and zoom in on a few spots for you guys. And obviously this takes longer than just throwing the coat on. And I want to say it's 250%, and then I cut some pieces out so you don't need to see me do the whole thing, right? It's pretty intuitive. So go there, we're going around, we're cutting it in, cutting it in, cutting it in. Okay, so there I'm just pointing out the color shade a little bit. And so we're getting ready to do our second coat on this on the blue part. And I said, well, I'm really not happy. I like it, but I wanted it a little bit darker and a little bit different shade of blue. So I'm just diving into this and gonna kind of wing it. Now winging it's fine. You can see we already had some blue that added gray to. We added another shade of blue, and now we just added some black. So, and that's fine if you're doing that, but just remember that if you have to go back, it's really tough to recreate those colors. Just make darn sure that you've got enough, or you remember, maybe write down what colors you mixed or something, because 3 days from now or whenever you get back to it, and you have to touch a piece of that up, you might have a hard time matching it. And I ended up really liking this color, and I've done a lot of these, so this is probably my 10th ocean scene one I've done. Yeah, but this is the first one with this big a turtle. This is the first design, so this is a brand new design for this video. I've never cut it, never painted it before, so we're doing this all together for the first time. And once again, a really fast, wish I could paint them that fast, a fast second coat, big brush, slap it on, get as close as you're comfortable with. And you see me painting out to the edge of that border. I don't know if anybody's thought about that or yet or not, but before I start this, I usually say, okay, this is going to be the border frame that I'm going to do in. I generally do like an antique brass, and I do that for a couple of reasons. One, I like it. It kind of adds a cool, almost a steampunk look to it with these metallic colors. And number two, it covers really well. So you can run over the edges, you can let all these different colors come to the edge and over a little bit. It doesn't matter what color it is. And then you can come back with that antique brass metallic, and it just almost one coat just covers it. So you cut that little bitty trim piece in along the side, and then the whole rest of it, I will probably paint the shells a different color, but the rest of it will be all that antique brass, even the outside edge. So that's why I kind of leave that bare, and I'm not too worried about getting it over the edge. But that's personal choice, right? I mean, you could trim the whole thing, and you could, some of them I paint the little curly cues different, and just depends how much detail you want to put into it. I don't think I've really seen anything so far that I need to. Okay, so this I skipped forward quite a bit. Second coat's done. And I'm going back and I brought some white paint out and I added just a little white paint. And I'm actually just hitting those little wavy parts with some light white paint. And it doesn't show up real well and it's not terribly noticeable. Obviously, yeah, I could have made it wider. I could have, but it's interesting. This stuff is all subtlety. So don't worry too much about exact detail. Your lines don't need to be. Matter of fact, and once again, I'm not an artist, so I may be saying all this backwards, but I found that the random mess ups and use of wrong colors and some things like that tend to make it look more realistic. And I'm sure I'll repeat myself through some of these. It's so some of this when you're especially when you're shading things. So don't use straight colors. I did use a white here because it's on a blue, but straight white versus a shaded white is a like night and day if you're shading something. Same thing with the dark colors. So if I'm going to shade, when we shade this turtle, which I haven't done this one yet, but when we shade it, I'd have the video done for it, but I hadn't done this one before. Right now I'm doing the little water bubbles and I'm just giving them some white and it looks a little bright right here, but when it dries you can barely tell I did it. But when we shade something, we won't shade this turtle black. We may outline it black, but we're not going to shade it black because black looks fake. So black is just, you don't want to use pure black for shading unless you're doing something like, I painted some really cool tigers you guys may or may not have seen on my site. Now some of those I will do black because that's what it needs, that much contrast. But I've found as a general rule, when you shade something, use darker tones of whatever you're shading. So if we were going to shade something, like if we later on, after we paint this coral and stuff, we'll come back and we'll shade it with a really, really dark blue. It'll almost be black, but there's a huge difference the way the straight black would look. And I'm just going over these lines again. And you guys will see me, you see me rubbing my finger a lot, right? I'm taking, what I'm doing is I'm taking the straight lines out of it. I'm blending it to the, and that kind of stuff makes all the difference. So if you paint something and you're like, oh, it just looks too good, just take your finger and rub your finger across it. And you'll see this a lot. I'm sure that I let the turtle and the base coat dry for at least a day overnight. And the reason being is because when we start to shade this, it's really important that if I shade something and I mess up, I can take a little wet brush and get it right off. And it's just boom, you clean it right up. It's like it never happened. But if you go too fast and you try to do that, you can't get it cleaned up. So just let it dry a day. Give it a day before you start your detail stuff. Because I don't know about you guys, but I mess up a lot. So I keep a wet angled brush next to me so I can wipe it, take it and swipe it or straighten a line up. If you've got a line you little over past the edge, you just work your little angled brush right up next to it. So there we've got our base colors and I think we're ready to go. And I believe this is about the end of it. And I'm going to I'll let this sit overnight before we get back to the next video. Right here, I don't know what I'm doing here. I'm just touching in. I must have missed a few spots on the cutting in the lines. But as soon as this one's over, the next video we'll be actually painting this turtle. Because I like to I paint the hardest stuff first. So when the turtle's painted and it looks good, then I'm not too scared about painting the rest of it. So thanks guys. I think this is the end of it and I'll see you in the next video.